Good afternoon. We start our broadcast from Kelvin and Athol today, our story with Ubabunkosi, by reading from the book of Joshua, chapter 4, and I'm reading verse 21 to 22. And it reads, "And he said to the people of Israel, when your children ask their fathers in time to come, what do these stones mean? Then you shall let your children know Israel passed over Jordan on dry ground." Good afternoon. Babungos, are you well?
I suspect I'm well.
Yes. Today we are talking about this, continue with our story, and we really want to talk about much more in detail now about all the pastors. You know, we want to talk about the issues of legacy. And Babungos, I've noticed that, and this has been puzzling me. I've noticed that if you look at all the pastors, let's go back to 1920s, right up to present, you don't seem to have a father to son succession, especially amongst the black churches. Whereas, for example, you go, for example, on the other side, within the white side of our church, I mean, our current president, for example, his father, Neil Wilson, was a president about in the 70s.
Yes. His grandfather was a president here.
And exactly. So you've seen 3 generations of pastors within that area. It's not happening within the Adventist, Black Adventist church. Why do you believe that is so?
I think this is characteristic of all colonized communities. They are plunged into a history where certain things cannot continue. They're plunged into a history where self-interest rises above communal or institutional interests. They're also given generally a system, an education system that does not prepare them for transmission, but for immediate function. It's something that does not create legacies. The very book you have there delineates a radical change in the curriculum at Spionco between that which was given to whites and the one that was given to black people.
True that, yeah. Yes. I mean, I saw that, and it's so different.
So primary and shocking, actually. I looked at the first list recently and I said, where is ministry here? What are they expected to do? To be garden boys?
True that. I mean, it seems as though they were being really trained like for subservience kind of work.
That's right. Yeah. So that you see, we need to be open about these things. Some people might be hurt because they think that they're in a train or in a church that is just about to go to glory, and no one must be complaining about things that the church has done. The fact is, when the first and second generation missionaries came here, that absorbed evolutionary thinking or pagan thinking about the heathen lands. You discover this when you read Spicer, when you read original texts from the Review and Herald, where the conversion of a chief, for instance, African chief, was a big story. But don't be that big to us.
Sure.
Because we're talking to a fellow African yes, who's merely perhaps moving from traditional African religion or Methodism to Adventism. Now, the whites who came here first, and sadly, even those who came as second or third generation Adventists, even fourth generation, still hold views about African people that are primarily archaic, evolutionary, and racist in the extreme. So the treatment of past black pastors did not advertise the Adventist ministry to their offspring. A lot of them have harbored secret or hidden pains against the institution. That's why a lot of pastors' kids, some of them don't come to church, some drink, some smoke. And I remember in one large church meeting in Soweto, hearing one pastor's child telling another, you want to be a minister in this church, so you are continuing the legacy of poverty in your family. Yeah.
You know, I think maybe this book, I don't know how we can actually maybe get this book in everyone's hands. You know, because I think it's probably one of the best books which actually...
It's a unique book.
It actually puts those stones where, for example, we can then teach our children that this is where we walked.
That's right.
You know, this is the legacy we have. Because I think Mfundisi Nhlapo here did a very good job in terms of capturing.
It's an
the
unusual
experience.
book.
Yes.
Because it's not a general history of things.
No.
There's biography there. There's development there. There's history. There's ideology as well there. And what has impressed me about that book, more than many other books blacks have written, is the hidden research he did. He went beyond, as we say in Zulu, he went beyond the cupboard to look for the dirt in the house.
No, he did, actually.
Yes,
he did.
yeah. This book should be highly honored.
You see, for me, and this is what this is about, you know, a lot of us, when we talk about history, we seem to be revisionist.
Unfortunately.
And we only want to touch on those things which actually tickle our fancy. Whereas what he was actually doing was actually telling like it is. And
Certainly.
for me, I mean, can I just read an excerpt here? It says that this book is not about victims. It's about victors.
Yeah.
It's not about disadvantage, but about advantage in the midst of gross disadvantage.
Yeah.
It is about the victory over a system that was imperfect at best and dysfunctional at worst. It is the intention of this book that the tears of the founding fathers be immortalized, lest they be forgotten.
Yeah.
How do we immortalize these tears, Bamkos? I see, for example, and we have been doing a list trying to capture maybe all the names of all the pastors and stuff. But how do you immortalize these tears, Bamkos?
But by the way, some of these are dead.
I know.
Some of these are dead, and some of the stories you will not like to hear. Yeah. How do we immortalize these men? I've thought about it, but I don't think I have arrived at a particular thing. One thing that came to me late last night was that perhaps we need a national convention funded, because some of these people may not have sufficient income to come to a particular area. One of the things I've liked in the GC and by some of the departments, they honor veterans for exceptional work, but that never happens in our sessions here. Because the conditions of our colonial nature are such that we go to church meetings, particularly constituency meetings, as rivals, to prove this or that, to remove this and that, to install this over that. And the result is that our sessions are the dirtiest types of meetings, where people are wounded. Some are wounded forever. I remember talking to a deceased relative of mine who was in the ministry and saying, Mfundisi, would you like me to, I would like to do an interview before you die. Because you know things and you saw things. He said to me, in the presence of his family, Brother Nkosi, I have suffered in this church. I don't want to say anything. I want to die in silence. And indeed, the pastor died in silence. Later, after the death, the wife gave me documents that he owned.
Bamkos, now, silence is not an option anymore.
Unfortunately.
Because we need to know the stones. Because you see, they say that those who do not learn from history are bound to repeat it.
Yes.
How do we start creating a legacy such that, for example, like there is Pastor Lupondwana this year, there will be another Pastor Lupondwana again from his sons and his sons and his sons, etc. How do we start creating those legacies? How do we have our own Wilson story?
Yes.
Within the context of...
I'm going to speak on my feet. One of the things we could do is to establish an institute whose task will be to rediscover the past, record it, look for its high points, highlight the point points, teach others to learn from the errors of our ancestors, of our pioneers, because they also made errors, despite the fact that they were never celebrated for their victories. Let me just give you an example that may not come into our discussion. Do you know the father of Pastor Mawela established about 8 schools before he died? But the schools are gone.
Know that. Oh.
Single-handed.
Was he a pastor also?
He was not a pastor.
Okay.
He loved education. Yeah. There are only 3 that I read about. When I talked to Mrs. Mawela sometime last, what in the presence of the son, she said, Ruben, you don't know the story. My father had more than 10 schools. My father-in-law had more than 10 schools. Such stories will go unrecorded. because we don't have those things in our archives. At the Union, the old Southern Union, somebody took a whole box of documents and burned them, thinking it's rubble, because they did not speak to his history. So some of our history now, we work together through relatives and so on, and I hope the job may not last less than 10 years, if we start now. But by the end of, say, a year or two, we're going to have something we can be proud of. So that's the first thing I think we need to do. Do on-the-ground research, interview people, record them. There are people who are willing to tell the story.
Sure.
There are some people who want to be known that they existed in this world. Not for selfish reasons, but because they have a story to tell. I have found documents I don't think I would have found anywhere else if I had not talked to particular individuals. And I can tell you that type of research and its commemoration, where it is good, can heal a lot of pastors' kids. We can then begin to say, Msibanga planted this tree, so and so watered it. The third generation is reaping the fruits, and they're planting more trees now. We don't have memorials, even in our institutions. You don't have walls of memory. Cliff did something for the TOC. When you walk into the TOC office today, you find the pictures of the leaders of this conference. But we need more than that. We need a story. What did this one do? Yeah, that can be.
Was that started by
That's Cliff. That's Cliff who did that, yes. And nothing followed thereafter. Nothing followed. So we have a dead historical memory that we need to doctor and raise. We may not follow every pastor, but we need to create a generation of history lovers in the church. Because frankly, when people forget their history, that's all they can remember.
Because let's just talk about the issue of history. You see, a lot of people are uncomfortable about the history because it's an uncomfortable topic.
Unfortunately.
There are a lot of bad things happen there. So rather, they'd like to honor it through silence rather than actually talk about it and heal because of it. What is your view?
I was thinking about this thing 3 nights ago. I was thinking of some of the stories that have happened in our church. And somebody once said, "We want to hurt kids now." What? Stop! Don't worry. Don't worry. We're telling a story. One of the things I love about the Bible, as Professor Roth said to us in a history class at Vista University, he had been spending a month teaching us how to validate the validity of a historical document. That Friday, when he dealt with the Bible as a historical document, she came out of her skin. We didn't know she was a Jew. She said, "I'm a Jew, I was born a Jew, I know Jewish history, I know Jewish culture, but I've learned to understand that our own faith has had its own errors." And then he says, "Here is the Bible." He brought the Bible to class. He scanned through it. In 10, 15 minutes, said, "So-and-so was a hero, but he had these weaknesses and so on." And then he outlined a number of characteristics of a valid historical document. He then said, one of them is that it does not hide the errors of its heroes. The Bible is such a document. It will tell you of the greatness of David, but it will tell you another story about David. And you keep wondering, if you are going to concentrate on his concubines and his adulteries, you'll get lost. Because all of us are like David. All of us are like Solomon. Who knows how many wives some of us have? You get a point. We may not reach 300 or 1,000, but the next one, the third one, can be a problem in society. So we need to understand that the Bible has human interest stories. Therefore, if we are going to be saved, God is interested in saving us from sins we've committed, not sins we've just imagined. David later writes Psalm 53. From the depth of his heart, because he knew he was vile. I mean, even Paul and all the disciples had their own pitfalls. Peter was struggling with short temper. You see, short temper. And he did something that he thought was patriotic, defending Jesus against potential assassin. But Jesus just took the ear and put it, and he didn't fight.
Sure.
Yeah, because he knew this guy's not converted.
Now, I don't know. Maybe this preoccupation with sanitizing our history and to preserve it and present it as what it's not Who does it serve? You know,
It serves the devil. I can tell you, it serves the devil. It serves those who want us to forget that we are hurting even while we're in silence. Let me tell you a story. In 2004, the TOC called a meeting of all pastors' kids who could attend a conference in the Val. We went to that conference at the Assemblies of God Center in the Val. And in the afternoon, Pastor Mautla, who was heading the ministerial department of the conference, asked me to chair a session on testimonies. There were about 22 to 25 persons there. I've never experienced such trauma in my life. Pastors' kids telling stories we vowed never to disclose. We vowed never to, because they came out with things we could not imagine. I still remember Reuben dropping tears on the floor. And I said, Reuben, it's your time. He said, give me 12, 10, 15 minutes. I'm still warming up. Banda's daughter was there. Pumla was there. You know, while Reuben was warming up, we gave the chance to some other people, and Pumla was moving around along the walls of that hall. I stood up and walked to her and said, Sister, don't collapse. She said, Babtula, I'm dying. Want to go to Cape Town and kill somebody. I said, Puma, what's the problem? She told me a story of how his father was tortured in a church whose name I will not mention. You know, this is the story. She says, we were transferred to that place, and people did not want us in their mission house. And they did not want us in their church. They decided to keep us in the vestry with all our property. He says we stayed in the vestry for weeks. And each time the deacons came there, they would ask us, when are you guys leaving this place? He says, there was one person I think I deserve to kill. With the testimonies I'm hearing here, I want to go to Cape Town and kill that person. I said, Pumla, I'm not going to kill anybody. You know, the result is that I think she told her father after retirement of what had happened. And Mfundisi Bandla told her, anytime you have a problem in Joburg, go to that young man called Tula. He will fix the problem.
So, Bongos, are you saying that the pastor's problem were not only systematic, also they were caused by the members themselves?
It's transgenerational. It's transgenerational, I can tell you, it's transgenerational. There are people who hate you just because you're a pastor's child. They think you are better, and yet we have never claimed that we are better people. Latina once lived in a butchery. We wondered, why is this house so cold? 2-room house, a family of 4. When my parents had to wash and to go out and play, we'd only come back when they were done. In South, that's what happened. And this kitchen we were using had been the cooler in the butchery.
And it was home for you.
It was home for us. It was home for us. But you see, I was younger. We were younger then, and there was nobody we could talk to. The field office was in the vest of the church. Yes. When Natal Swaziland field was created, my father, as a treasurer, was working in the vestry of the old Walusede church. People don't know these stories. He would walk 8 kilometers to Manzini to drop money there because he had no car and he had no bicycle. He didn't want to spend church's money on taxis or buses. My father's a walker. So all I'm trying to tell you is there are stories that need to be unpacked here, unveiled. Some of them might not be pleasant. We will see how we will doctor them so that people don't run away from the church and say, if things are this bad, this is not the true church. And for me, that validates the fact that the church is composed of weak real human beings.
You see, Babungose, for me, I think it's actually an honor that in spite of suffering like that, that some of these people are still in this church.
The Sibanyones, the Sbayas were in that meeting. We did not know that one of their sisters was injured through a church appointment. I didn't know. They said this eldest brother who died, the young man was there. I'm not sure if he was there. The one who attended. Yeah, I don't think he was there. I think they would have been hell. Because they would cause a lot of trouble for Maut. You know, after Reuben and Pumla and Sbaya, about 8 people spoke. After those people, there was just a moment of silence. People were crying. I also cried. Maheti had been asked to be a speaker. He stood up, said to me, "I'm leaving. You know, I was not born in this church." He pulled his wife, said, "Baby, let's go. When I was born in this church, no, I can't tolerate this. I don't understand why these people are still in the church with these stories." Maheti left. Phoned me 2 days later, said, Did you take the flag? I said, "What could we do? We're running." And you know what? My wife now says in retrospect, it helped to hear such stories because people then cooled down. Pastor Mawela's son does not want to attend meetings of that nature, nor does he want to go to a session. He says, "I no longer want to be heard. I just want to go to Jesus one day and ask him, why did these things happen?" But of course, there'll be no time for all those stories. But all I'm trying to say, Mandla, the history of the church is a real human story. We must stop glorifying it. And it's so all over the world, by the way. If you can read what the church has done elsewhere. I mean, I'm just going to give you a typical example. In Romania, 300 of our church members were disfellowshipped from the church for opposing Adventist leaders from taking Adventist students to a interdenominational seminary. They asked them, what distinctive doctrines will be taught there, will be discussed. And some of these men are in the church as communist spies. For 10 years they were outside of the church. When the GC reviewed the story, they discovered that the union had been wrong. Those people were then reinstated. So the church does err, just as the church in the Bible erred. So to present an idea of the church as some holy temple where everything is kosher and things are glorious is utterly wrong. You know, Professor Roth said to us, accept the genuineness of a thing when it confesses its own weaknesses. He says the Bible does not hide the errors of its heroes. This is one of its major contributing marks because it will tell you that Solomon had wives. Peter could doubt. Paul had a thorn that kept worrying him. We don't know. So all these, we may not know all the weaknesses of there was a Saul. The Bible is full of errors, but the Bible is also full of heroes. The Bible is also full of people who repented of the greatest leader, one of the greatest leaders on earth, Moses, one day he lost his temper. Because these people are human. You know, one of the reasons why I love the Bible month is that it is telling a story based on the lives of people who drank water and ate porridge.
Okay. I hear you, but it still doesn't make sense to me. In the same church, one section is able to achieve the generational issues.
Okay, fine.
One is not.
Yeah, I think that should be the second, perhaps the primary area of our operation. You know, I've been thinking recently I've been reading every newspaper every day, ever since this COVID thing started, because I want to see which way thought in the black community and in the national community gathered is going. I've come to realize that history is one of the dirtiest things on earth. You can cleanse parts of it, but you're not going to cleanse every part of it. Whites in this church were taught wrong doctrines in anthropology and sociology. They were not overt, but they were covert. They came with them. I mean, if you read some of their original texts, they call us kephas in Adventist writings. Kephas, you find pictures in which blacks are not named, but whites are named in the same picture. You wonder, how do you see a white man, you don't see a black man who's so conspicuously on a white page? How can there be blackness on a white page and you don't see it, but you see whiteness on a white page? Yeah, I think the General Conference, the divisions, and must admit that the church here, particularly in Africa, has been more human than divine. All this battering of issues, it's just not, we're not going to win the current generation of young people. Young people want realism now. Young people want realism. Some of them are going into bad habits because they think we are phony. So whites also, we need to drag them into a situation where they can confess that their forefathers created evil. They've inherited a church that is injured. And we need to find a new Adventist church in South Africa, because the current one is not going to save anybody.
You know, Bangos, I was reading an article from the Harvard Business Review. I think it is a 2016 article in December. They talk about how to build a legacy.
Okay.
And one of the things they talk about is that for a legacy to exist and to continue, one, people have to believe that it's theirs.
Okay.
They have to have ownership so that they want to protect it
I see.
and preserve it. Could it be that, for example, a lot of the black pastors' kids never saw church as theirs? They saw it as something foreign, which is my father is doing, but it's not me, it's not part of me.
Especially those of my age, because we went through the structural changes that took place between 1958 and 1963. We saw, I think I told you, perhaps here or elsewhere, that the eight fields that were created at that time were each given a capital of 2,000 rands. My father was the treasurer of the Natal, Swaziland, Eastern Transvaal field. He had to be away from home for 2 weeks, collecting money from the churches, and stay in the office for 2 weeks, paying pastors. So he was never at home, except for sleep. He was never with us. If my mother had not grown up as a pastor's child and knew what to do, and if she had not gone to Bethel College, perhaps we would have been a different breed of children. One of the best things my parents ever did for us, I always tell my brothers and sisters that we need to thank them for. They never spoke to us badly about the church. We knew that my father had been done wrong by certain people. There was a relative of mine whom you know, he's dead now. He would sometimes come from Joburg and harass people he had been told had harassed the family through my father. I remember one time, he parked his car, arrived from Joburg and parked his car and opened the door, talked to a child on next. Oh, when I'm fine, you are the one who took my child's ball here. Talking to a daughter of hers who was growing in our home. So my parents, and I think they did well for us, protected us from knowing the evils of the church, even while we knew that the evil was being done against them. Let me give you a story. Oh, I think I told you the story about my father and a donation given to the church by colours. Did we tell them? Yeah, colored people in Pietermaritzburg donated money for evangelism. You know the story, yes, yeah. I think another thing that really harmed the black church was its legal status, minority in South African property law. We could not own things. Bethel did not belong to us. We went there to school, but it was owned by white people. It was owned by those who could own property. We could not own property. You get the point? So whites then used their legal leverage to develop their institutions. They could raise money because they owned things. That's why Helderberg Bethel will never look like Helderberg unless we do something radical to it. Because whites had the privilege of a legal system that advantaged them.
Now, what about the issue maybe of this movement of pastors from one area to the other? How did it play out within the white side of the church? When they moved a family, how did that happen versus how they moved it? It happened amongst the black families.
White people have been humane to one another to an extent greater than that which you find in the family, in the black family. There are pastors' wives who never moved with their husbands. There are kids who did not move with their parents. There are pastors who did remote pastoring. For a number of reasons. I mean, let's say your wife is a professor at Wits and you're a pastor and you're transferred to Kimberley now. It might not be easy for you to move. You get a point? So there were such things, and so pastors' wives were treated as chattel, property. You move. And if you don't move with your wife, you lose your job. Lose your job. I only know one pastor who's dead now, whose wife never moved with him. The late Pastor Abel Kopedi. We never saw him with his wife. Never saw him with his wife. And we only started seeing her when were
When he's
here.
retired.
Yeah, almost at the time for retirement. But there were such wives who could stand their ground because they were professionals. I mean, you can't be moving a nurse all over. She was a nurse. Yeah. Some of the pastors' wives who had no profession, so it was easy for them to move. That movement also disrupted school. You won't believe, man. I mean, I passed matric after being to 8 schools. It's unbelievable. There was a time when I went to 3 schools in 1 year.
Because of the movement.
Because of the movement. And I know kids of today would be highly traumatized, would need a psychologist or psychiatrist to fix the trauma.
Trauma,
yes, yeah. But it happened with us because, fortunately, there was a general South African culture of suffering. And so you were like other people. Suffering was the theme of life.
Yes.
But you can't do that today. We can no longer do that. You can't propose that to a child. The trauma of moving from one system to another. For instance, let me tell you, we moved from Klerksdorp to Pietermaritzburg. While we were there, we moved to Dundee. While we were in Dundee, within 3 years, we went to 4 places. You get the point? Which is why I never saw Alexander, and yet I was born there until I was 19. I was born in the house next to the Alexander Church. That was the pastor's house.
On line of F4.
It's now owned by strange people who moved in there during the time of the struggle. But if you go there, I went there last year, those guys told me this house belongs to the church. House belongs to the church. So there's a lot of sanitation we need to do on our history to make it look like a tellable story.
What has been the role of the church members in all of this?
I wanted to complete the story.
Yes.
Your own grandparents lived in a 2-roomed house, I think, in Kwaluseni.
Yes.
Yeah. It was built in the mission station.
One of my brothers was born there, yes.
And that's why I saw your dad. Yeah. So, I have a picture of him walking out of the house, half lit because there was no electricity, into the dark, dressed in an overcoat. It was something like winter at night. I don't know whether she was going to a shop. That's the last picture I had of him until I saw him again in Soweto. So we were one in suffering, but because the suffering made us one. We were all covered by a blanket of trouble of various kinds. But I want to suggest also that certain things happened post, I don't know when, because my memory of the early years of black ministry was that they could not sleep in hotels, they could not sleep in PNPs. I remember my own home housing pastors several times. We enjoyed the act because we would be sent to the dining room to sleep, all of us under the table. It gave us time to talk, to dream, and sit. I remember talking to one pastor who was teaching in Heidelberg, and I said, have you ever slept in the home of a pastor? He said, why? When there are hotels. And I could sense that the ministry sort of has become impartial, impassive to human needs. One reason why I think pastors fight at session is that they don't know one another's meals. They've never been fed by a pastor's wife in their home. They are fed in meetings and so on. So there's a lot we need to correct.
So you're saying there were some positives out of this?
Yes, out of this misery.
Yes.
And that's why the pastors of old generally had a certain ethos that they could share among themselves. And they knew one another. And by the way, many of them were related. When I'm connected to the Moyas, Pastor Moya, I'm connected to the Ngwenyas, I'm connected to the Msimangas, I'm connected to there are connections among us. Some of them go into the Eastern Cape. Yeah, Eastern Cape, and you begin to say, something was lost that kept us together. Because they went to the same schools, they were given the same troubles at school and so on, but today we go to Solusi, we go to Baraton, we go to the University of Africa, and so these variations have sort of created a church with variant life perspectives. I come from there, you don't come from there. I'm a Solusi, and you are a Bethelian, you are a Helderbergian, whatever names they use, you get the point, yeah. And yet, we can't fault people for that, but I think we did not reach a stage where we formed a common story. The story is busy disintegrating now.
Pastor Nhlapo mentions an issue there that these pastors as well were very much under-resourced. But,
Highly.
for example, they knew all their members by heart.
Yes.
They knew each and every issue of each and every member. They had no cell phones. They had nothing. But they were so connected to their church members.
Let me tell you a story about when I talk to senior people in the Durban area and elsewhere, they'll tell you that my father knew their kids by name. When they met them in the church, where he saw and so, he saw it so. He had a powerful memory. And I think that's he also injected me with a love for, there were many history books at home. That's why I developed a love for history. But one thing I do know, well, something unique about him, I told you earlier on, that my father enjoyed making people pray in the corridors of the walkways in the city.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember a man Desmond Koba,
Yes.
one day saying to me, Mfana, uzalwa eqhawe. But we ran away when we were to pray in the street. He says, I wish you could come back today. I'm ready to kneel in the street and pray. Well, people are passing around. And, all of them now, in hindsight, feel we need the prayer on the streets of Durban, pavements of the Durban city. Because life has changed. It's strange how age makes you revise the glories of the past, and you begin to value certain things that happened, however simple they might have looked like. But I think, Manda, what we need to do, we need a convocation where we can create a common story. The Boers have done it through the Broederbond. Yeah, because they were a dissipated group. The English really almost shattered them during the First World War and their movement into power. Look where they are now. They are forced to reckon with, because they also formed their own institutions. By the way, one of the weaknesses of the black church in this country is that it does not have its own institutions. Yes. So it cannot project an ethos to its kids. Yeah, because VETS is not UCT. UCT is not Rhodes. Rhodes is not Ogoy. Ogoy is not UGA.
So there's no common...
There's no common communal vision of who we are. Helderberg, Bethel, Solusi, etc. All we think we know is we're Adventists. But what is the philosophy we're projection into the church and into the future? So the death of Bethel is also a death of an ethos. Death of an ethos. I was in Mpumalanga in a youth meeting some 12 years ago. I spoke about Adventist. I was asked to speak about Adventist education. And during lunchtime, a decent young couple came to me and said, where was this school called Bethel? We heard you talk about, where was this school? I went to bed that night saying, I remembered the Bible saying, there rose a generation that did not know. Was it Joshua Moses?
No, yes. No, well...
Yeah, and I said, we have that generation now, it has arrived. That does not know where we come from.
But how do you remedy that, Babukos?
It will require a group of people who are determined to pull the good strengths from the past and mix them with the good strengths from now, sophisticate the story enough for a contemporary generation to aspire to associate with. And you won't believe, Mandla, it might not take a long time.
Because I hear what you're saying, but how then do we deal with the situation, for example, within the context of South Africa, where we are also a melting pot for all the other African countries coming into here, and sometimes they may not understand our story. In fact, they may not even be interested in our story. And sometimes some of them actually even say it straight up to your face that I'm not interested. I'm much more focused on on the Christ who's coming. I don't really care what you're saying. In fact, we've heard some of those comments even as we are talking here.
Yeah, I have realized, Mandla, each country has got its own ethos.
Sure.
Each country has got its own experience of the past. South Africa is the most sophisticated part of SADC because of the high number of foreign whites, to their embeddedness in our statecraft and industry and economy. Thirdly, the type of education we're given by them, we have never designed our own system. Because even the current one has borrowings from all over.
Sure.
And we still need to create a South African system of education. Now, and that's why the church has failed, because if it had saved us from what we have gone through in public education, we would be a distinct nation. People would be saying, but those aren't like us. What is it that they were fed on? Why do they dress this way? Why do they speak this way? Why do they behave this way? So we allowed the apartheid colonial culture to dominate the church because whites got security within it, which is why some of them worked as its military defenders. Yeah, we have a job to do, Mandla. I'm beginning to sense that perhaps a few of us might need to decide to be martyrs, because we've got guys who are going to say, "You want us to starve now?"
Yeah, no,
and pick the messenger rather than the one who sent the messenger. It must be done, though, Mandla.
I was reading something as I was on issues of legacy. I mean, there's a statement by this guy, William James. He says that the great use of life is to spend it for something that will outlast it.
Is that the psychologist?
Yes.
Yeah.
And you're right, Bob, because I think we need to look beyond ourselves.
Yes.
Let me tell a story. There's a story, I don't know if you know a story of Al Capone. Al Capone.
I had guys who were going to the cinemas.
Yeah.
I don't know what was happening.
He was the mobster in Chicago in the early 1900s. Al Capone.
Is it an old story? I thought it was recent.
No. This is in the early 1900s. And Al Capone actually had a very good lawyer. His name was called Easy Eddie.
Okay.
They used to call him Easy Eddie. The reason why Al Capone evaded the cops so much was because of Easy Eddie. He knew how to take him out of trouble.
I see.
And because of that, what then Al Capone did was to actually pay him a lot of money. So he lived large in Chicago. He was the man in Chicago. And the problem with Easy Eddie, though, that he had a son. And he loved his son. And he adored his son. And he wanted to make sure that his son did all the good things.
Okay.
Unfortunately, he was handicapped by his own life.
The son.
And linked to Capone.
I see.
So he could not provide him with a good
upbringing.
With a good example, because he wanted his son to be perfect. He sent him to the best school and everything else, but every time, because of the integrity, his integrity was linked to Al Capone. He couldn't shake that, and that's for that reason that at some point in time, Easy Eddie decided to actually then turn against Capone and actually went to the cops and actually raided the mob. He knew that would kill him, but he said in his mind, he said, "Look, if I would do one thing so that my son can see some semblance of integrity and maybe learn from that, I would have achieved it." Obviously, you know what happened? The mob killed him. He was shot dead in Chicago, in Chicago Street, and he died. When you say that you need to be martyred, sometimes that's what you need. But the story doesn't end there. And then in World War II, there's a guy called Butch O'Hare. Butch O'Hare was an aviator. And he's in his squadron, they were flying in a formation. And then he realized that he actually doesn't have enough fuel. So he asked for his commander. He said, "Look, I need to go back to the ground because I don't have enough fuel." So they allowed him to do that. As soon as he dropped down, and guess what he saw? He saw something which just made his blood, his hair stand. He saw a full squadron of Japanese soldiers. Aircrafts coming.
This is the enemy.
Yeah, coming towards their squadron. So they're flying towards the squadron. So he realized that he doesn't have enough time to go back and warn them, or he can't even communicate with them. So he said, "Okay, what I need to do, I need to deal with this myself." So he started, going into a squadron of close about 20, alone, one man. And he fought with them. Flew into them. He took 5 of them down until they fled. And then he went down. When he got down, he then told the story. And then when they looked at this camera, they realized that actually, whoa, this man did so much work alone. He's the first guy, actually, who then was given what's this order in the U.S.? They call the Order of Honor, the Congressional Order, Medal of Honor.
Yes.
The first aviator to be given that. But over and above that, Chicago O'Hare Airport is named after him.
You don't say.
Chicago Airport is probably one of the
Biggest.
the biggest, in fact, the busiest airport in the world is named after him. But what you also don't know is that Bush O'Hare was Eddie's son.
Bush?
Was Eddie's son.
You don't say.
Exactly. Now, what I'm saying is that what I really want to dig what you're saying. When you say that sometimes you need to be a martyr, so that at some point later, someone else will actually benefit and actually do something great because of the example you set.
Yeah.
You see, Eddie could not be a good example to his child, but his single act of actually changing and doing that one thing taught his son that he needs to sometimes sacrifice himself, and that's what he did also. And he was honored for that. Obviously, because we've had a lot of our parents, our grandparents who were martyrs, but they were never even honored.
They were never honored.
And no one even, I'm not sure if any of us are taking the baton after them to try and make sure that their death is not in vain.
No, not at all.
How then do we energize, how do we mobilize our young people right now to go back and look at those stones and find them so they can immortalize them?
I think some of those stones, Manza, let's start with the simple one. We need to recover the names of the authors of our literature, black literature.
Okay.
Who translated the Christmas Sabelelweni? Who wrote the books we talked about in earlier sessions? Let's start with the software before we go to the hardware.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's start with those things that people will easily identify with. Let's start with those things that people say, wow, we didn't know. Perhaps then relaunch the books. Relaunch the books and redeem them from ignominy, because, for instance, are being sold all over the streets of Joburg, and even by none-advists, they don't know where the books comes from. You get the point? And I mean, Umayeni did not, all these people did not have degrees, but they were able to translate with exactness
and capture the
essence of the English text into our local languages. And nowhere can you fault those languages, except that some of them are written in old orthography. Yeah. So we would need to doctor the orthography now, yes. But honestly, I don't think our story, cognizant of what we're now discussing, is as bleak as we perhaps may experience it now. Perhaps we may start by saying we have declined. We had heroes in the past. And they did this. They left us with a heritage. I mean, who else has added to this text? Who else has added to this text? And the General Conference need to tell us how much they gave to these people for translation. Because when you translate, it's bigger. You're doing something bigger than just straight writing. Because if I have to translate a text I write in English into Zulu, there's a lot of thinking I must do to cover the concept in a foreign language. Yes. Let me just give you an example. I got the story from the late Pastor Foss. He says there was somebody who had to translate a book from the General Conference, some manual, and somewhere he had to deal with the fact that the Israelites took spoils of the Egyptians as they left. Thus the translator just looked at the word spoil and wrote Babon Zagalisa. Amachiput, Israel. They harmed them. That's not the intention. Yeah, that's not the intention. And it was not even spoils from war. They asked for these things so that they could sustain themselves on the way. But nowhere do you find wrong translations. I sometimes take the Zulu Sabbath School lesson and look through it. I know one of them was Batotse, late Pastor Batotse, who died recently. And these people are never honored.
What is happening currently? Are they being honored?
No, they are not honored. I think I read some 30 years ago in the police that there was something like some honorarium, but it's, I don't know. But the question is, why are their names not there? How can my name not be in a Zulu text? I mean, if you and I were to translate Shakespeare now into Zulu, surely would the author, the publishers would tell translated by.
Yes.
You get the point?
Yes.
So I have a suspicion that whites made money out of the sweat of our parents. You get the point? I mean, Ukresa has been used in the whole of Southern Africa. Beyond our borders. Beyond our borders. We find it in Zimbabwe. Find it in areas where Zulu is being used. Up to Zambia. But who got money for the translations? So there's ethics that we have to go into and revise, try and dig into the past. Who did what? Why are white people in the church enjoying being Adventists? Why do we have to endure being Adventists?
Enjoyment versus enduring. Yeah, no. This is a deep subject, Bamgos. As we come to a close, Bamgos, it's very important that, therefore, that we need to, therefore, start thinking about those things, which, like you say, for example, we can start with books in terms of translation. What else can we look at? That is one area we can look at. What else should we look at?
The other thing, we should look at certain acts of heroism. Let me give you an example. The late Pastor Lidecha introduced Adventism in a San community.
Okay.
He packed his tent with a lot of goods, his car, and drove to a desert area in Botswana. And he stayed there. He says for a month, nobody could speak to him. He says later he saw Saint kids coming towards him, but they were just a stone's throw away, and he threw sweets at them. He says he did this for 3 weeks. He had bought a lot of sweets until these kids came closer and closer and closer. By the time he died, he had won a community of church members among the San, and he could speak the language as well. They learned it from the kids. So being a missionary does a lot and requires a lot of work. We now have San churches in Botswana. I doubt if we have any in South Africa, because this group was used against in the liberation struggle.
But maybe one other area is to actually look at various churches, how they were formed in each and every area. Because some of these, there are a lot of pastors who did a lot of work. Not only pastors, by the way, even members who actually did a lot of work in terms of setting up those churches.
It's a fact. I'm thinking of the churches in Soweto, for us, that who built those churches. Some of the money came from Bokoko and from their pensions, who wanted to see a place they could worship. That's why this COVID thing is killing some of our people. When will I see my Jesus who lives in the church? Is that just that type of mindset that's here? So some will never go back to church. They're going to die in the course of the COVID dispensation. They never go back to church. And I think it's time, post these lectures, these discussions, for us to concretize a historical movement forward and restore those who left because of ill treatment, restore their confidence in the church. We don't need to be saved by the mercy of whites. We are saved by the mercy of the one who went to the cross. Not a single European died for us.
Let me read something. I think the closing chapter, when he says in conclusion, he says that, and let me read this. He says that the black pulpit is at war with itself. The pews are not being fed. Postmodern ministers are over-resourced with technological communication gadgetry, but they do not know their members. The era of useful intellectual engagement is gone and has been replaced by peacetime political showmanship. Congregationalism is becoming an attractive option for the ecclesiastical pockets overwhelmed by the disillusionment with the black organized ministry.
I would not have said that. Cliff has a way of seeing things that we don't see. I think I'm influenced by my study of sociology. He goes into spirituality.
Yes.
And the issues that bother him as somebody who is a participant in the ministry. He sees this wayward, and he's describing it in the correct terms, indeed. Some of us would call them mercenaries, unfortunately, to use a political term. Because you really wonder whether some of them are called. When last did you see a pastor in your own house? Do you know my father, my mother knew when the doors were locked in the house that your father is busy fixing a fight in the street. That's how we knew. He's busy. My father never allowed blacks to fight. Why you fight? Oh, but when I do that today, my mom says, don't do that. Don't come out of the house. You would get injured. She's worried about my safety. My father never worried about his safety. He wanted a society that had peace. The result is that when my father died, more people came from the community to help us than those who were members of the church.
You know, Bamgosi, I don't know if you know Bob Moli from Springs.
Yes.
Bob Moli died when he was 93.
Is that so?
You know, Bob Moli, you know what he used to do every morning? He used to wake up at 4 in the morning, make sure that the grandkids are fine, they go to school,
Wow.
everything is fine. And then from 9, you know what Bob Moli would do? He will start in his street on house number 1, visiting with one. Every day until 2 o'clock when the kids are coming back, he'll do that. He did that for the last 20 years of his life. He would do the whole street and then the following street and then come again and do it again.
For no income.
No. You wake up every day to find out how they are doing, what he can do to help.
But by the way, as you speak now, I think in the history we want to create now, we need to involve some of our zealous lay people. Because it is not only the pastors who made this church. Some of our lay people went beyond what we'd call the call of duty to service this church, to keep this church going. Some were pastors. Let me tell you something that you will not believe. When Pastor late Gubeni was transferred to KZN, he found an elder who had been in that position for 31 years. When he removed him, that area called in Tabamhlop.
Next escort, yes.
Yes. His sons, who were not church members, met him in the street, did a job on him. The pastor had to sleep for weeks in hospital, injured by boys. They said, why do you remove our father from his job? And then you look at Gubeni and you think, this is an old man, what does he know? He left school at this stage. But his record in heaven is that he shed blood for this. There are many such people.
Yeah.
So we need to excavate the story as much. The daughter is still alive, Mama is Shonile, but I think there are people who would be willing to tell their stories.
This is our story from Kelvin on Athol Church. We really are inviting you to share. If you have something to say about the story, if you have your own story, please share with us as we continue the story next time. Bamkosi, thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you.
Nkosi, Nkosi sigele